the young people themselves are just so smart. They're directly impacted. As a lot of times we've been saying, people who are closest to the problem are often closest to the solutions, but they often don't have the megaphone, they don't have the platform, they can't get heard. And so we're going to hear from some of the young people themselves, especially we're delighted to have Merrit Jones. She's joining us from Columbia, South Carolina. She's a student advisor of something called Student Voice, and it's a not-for-profit organization, and it's dedicated to strengthening the student movement. They're empowering high school students to take up action on the issues that impact them. I want to welcome to this conversation, Merrit Jones. Love your last name, by the way, Merrit.
Thank you, Van. I really have the great honor of introducing two other students today that we're going to spend a lot of time diving into just some of the things they're going through right now. But since the beginning of COVID, we as students have really been thinking about the systemic issues that have unearthed themselves in new ways to all of us. I think most of us here know that they've existed and only been exacerbated by this pandemic. But from the beginning, students have been getting to work. They've been talking about solutions. They've been thinking about ideas, expressing their frustrations, advocating at their school boards, at their state levels, and even federally for increased funding and resources. At the beginning of the pandemic, I started talking to students all over the country, and that's how I met folks like Opal and Francis, whom I'm getting ready to introduce. And through those conversations, me and my peers worked to just create a set of guiding principles for what we really believe were absolutely necessary for equitable reopening. And that became a nationwide campaign we're calling Move School Forward. Because I think bottom line is we don't want to return to the same system we left back in the spring. And as we are all heading back to school this week next and in a couple weeks in New York, I think now more than ever, it's important to be talking to students and be in conversation with students if we really want to find solutions. And that is why I am thrilled to introduce our first panelist here, Opal Baysaw, who is a high school junior in Kalispell, Montana. She is a journalism fellow at Student Voice, and she is a passionate and fierce disability advocate. So I'm going to just open up the floor to you, Opal, to just share, what happened this spring and what's been going on in Montana with your personal learning situation, knowing that you're a student who has an IEP and has been thinking about things like that, and IEPs, 501s, and how your peers are dealing with that.
There has actually been a lot going on with that. Like, as far as last spring went, online school was obviously new for everyone in the state because schools closed down in March. And so there were a lot of kinks to be worked out as far as the amount of work that was given, because one of my accommodations is reduced and alternate assignments. And so sometimes the ways that I did my assignments and how much work I did in the day needed to be adjusted quite a lot, because I had friends that would end up with 3 hours of work a day, but since everything tends to take me a little longer, I would end up with the same amount of work, if not more work, than I had in a typical in-person school day.
Yeah, and we're going to come back to that, but I want to introduce our second panelist, Francis Suavillo, who this spring was in LAUSD, and she was serving the school district as a student board member. So as we introduce you, Francis, I would love to hear what it was like this spring as we started going online, and just sharing a little bit about your experience in being an advocate in that position and having to be a voice for young people in one of the largest school systems in our country.
Hi, so like Merrit mentioned, I served as the sole student board member for the Los Angeles Unified School District in my senior year. And the transition to online learning was difficult for a lot of us. We serve over 600,000 students, and a lot of our students don't have the resources to have stable internet connection or have electronics that can help aid them with the transition to online learning. So it was definitely a lot of trying to be patient and trying to make sure that we're there for students who need the help. And a lot of our students, go to school and get their meals from schools as well. So we made sure that those resources are still available for students and families who do depend on getting their nutrition from school grounds. It was a tough, very, very tough transition for us students and for the teachers as well, who did not see this coming this in this way, in this capacity. So it was difficult for us uh, during that transition in March.
Yeah, so we started to see that our system was not prepared for what happened in March. And for most of us, we're still in line. I know, Opal, you are just now starting school, have finished up your first week or two. Tell us about what's working this time. What's school like round two? What do we learn from the spring?
School on round 2 is definitely, granted this is only my first week, but I would say now that the teachers and students are more used to navigating like platforms like Hangouts and Zoom for school, it is definitely a little less daunting than it was in the spring. Granted, the workload may go up after the first few weeks, but I feel confident that now that the world is a little more used to online school, that my accommodations will be very well met this school year, hopefully.
I'm glad to hear that. I know we've had conversations too about your peers, and Francis, I know we have as well. What are you thinking about when it comes to peers and other students who have IEPs and their own plans that they need specialized attention, which is of course challenging in a virtual world?
I definitely do think that administration plays a really big role in this, because as much as students want to advocate for themselves, it's kind of hard to keep talking about what it is that you need when there's nobody there listening to you. So everybody needs to take a step back and truly listen and truly try to understand what it is that students need and what students are calling for. So it's not just performative, okay, we listen to student voice and we value what student wants, but they don't actually put in the effort to make sure that those practices are implemented, whether that be in curriculum or how students receive that help and how it's accessible, especially for students with disabilities and who do need that specialized attention.
Yeah, at Student Voice, and our friends at Teens Take Charge have a saying we like to borrow. That's, the only thing better than student voice is adult action. So I agree. It's not just listening to young people, although that's step one, and hearing what students and teachers and parents are feeling in this moment. Step two is action and trying things out. And so I know, Opal, you and I have had a conversation too, and I'd love Francis to jump in here as well. What are kind of the three main things that are your priorities going into this new school year that you think school districts and schools and teachers should be prioritizing? We're not going to get everything right, but what are the three things you think are really key in this moment?
I would say that I think that schools should definitely be prioritizing the mental health of their students and their staff, because last year my high school had some very earth-shaking mental health problems that our school kind of fell apart. So I think it's very important that the school finds ways to help those students stay mentally healthy in addition to their schoolwork, because we don't want to lose any more students and staff than we already have. And I would also say that it's definitely very important to make sure that those students that have IEPs, not that a lot of them that I know of are going remote, most of them are back in person, since my high school is doing hybrid learning. Most of those kids are back in person, but I would say that the ones that are on remote should have access to say para support. Like, I know last spring I didn't have aides and was mostly relying on both my parents, who were also remotely working, but this year I do have that, so that makes me hopeful that if we have to do this for an extended period of time, I have my needs met without relying on my parents.
And I want to make sure really quick, Opal, will you tell the audience what an IEP is for those who might not know what that means?
An IEP is an individualized education plan, which basically means, in simple terms, that a student with a disability, whether it be a learning disability, a cognitive disability, or even a physical disability like I have, gets what they need to be successful within their education and get as much as they can out of that inappropriate public education that is offered by our government.
Thank you. Wanted to make sure we clarified that for everyone. Francis, so thinking back to the spring, and I know you're heading into your first year of college is next week, but thinking about your kind of high school experience, what do you think we need to prioritize? What from the spring did you learn that you knew needed to be prioritized right off the bat heading into the fall?
I definitely do agree with Opal with mental health, because I feel like a lot of people expected teenagers to be okay with the situation, thinking that we just thought of this as like a mini vacation for us. But in reality, it was so difficult for teenagers who thrive off of social interaction, who literally grow from being around their friends all the time, to suddenly being so isolated and just so far apart from the people that they saw literally every day for years on end, right? And it was hard for us mentally to make that switch right away, and then finding out, oh, we're not coming back. As a senior, when all of this was happening, all I could think about was the little things, even though, everything in the world was on fire and it was just crumbling down in front of me. As a teenager who was a little bit selfish at the time, all I could think about was, wow, I won't get a graduation. Wow, I won't get a prom. And it's those little things that kind of broke everyone's heart that made everything such a reality for us. Um, and it took a toll on our mental health, even if it was as silly as not having a school dance or anything like that. But for us who have been dreaming of that one night since we were, in third, second grade, and in public education for 13 years, it was that one night that we were really dreaming about. And it really did make a difference in the way that we performed in schools, because now it's like, well, what are we looking forward to? Another day stuck at home and not being able to do anything, and not being able to experience the things that we've been hoping to experience for so long. And it really did make an impact. And a lot of people didn't really notice it in that way. A lot of people thought we were making a big deal out of nothing. And it may seem like nothing, but to us, it was everything at the time. And another thing that I think is a big issue is accessibility. At least in my school district, like I mentioned, we're the second largest school district in the US. And we serve over 600,000 students, and our board meetings are on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Tuesday is a school day, 1 p.m. we're still in classes. And students who want to be there, who want to advocate for what's going on in their school grounds, what they feel is lacking in their public school education, they can't stand there and tell the board members what it is that they're feeling. They can't stand there and make the impact that they want to make, because LA traffic is brutal. By the time you leave at 11 a.m., you won't be in the Beaudry building, which is in downtown LA, until 1:30. And that's already 30 minutes into the board meetings. And it's hard to want to be where you want to make the change without having the resources to get you there. So right now we're having our board meetings on Zoom, and now more students are able to participate. But what happens after we all start going back in person? Will those resources be taken away? Because now we'll be sitting in class and we're back to square one and not being able to say what we want to say and make that difference that we want to make.
Yeah. And I agree, accessibility, that's, I think, a bright spot that's come out of COVID, and how many more students are showing up for their school districts and parents are able to access that. So I want to just highlight that we're talking about IEPs and meeting every student's individualized need, mental health, and how we can make virtual and in-person communities safe and comfortable for students, and those actual accessibility supports and those direct decision making, and how young people can really be involved in those decisions. And I thank you for both of you for uplifting and highlighting your perspectives on those. And I hope that if folks tuning in can take those things away, those are what students are thinking about in this moment, and so much more.
Thank you so much, Merrit. Thank you, Opal. Thank you, Francis. You started off the day in such an inspiring and productive way. That kind of advocacy and hope and the deep understanding you have of the issues for yourself and your peers is really inspiring.